I've got everyone in. I want to thank everyone for joining us today for our panel on how to become a lobbyist. And I want to thank you all for joining. If you want, you can just go ahead and use speaker view. It might be easier. We have right now over 60 people on. We had almost 300 people sign up for this webinar, so we're really excited. This sounds like a great topic. I'd like to thank and introduce our panelists today, Daphnee Sainvil and Steve Fenske, for joining us and for taking the time out to share their experiences as lobbyists with us. So, Dee, would you like to start out, kind of tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into the field? And
Sure. So as most of you know me, I'm Daphnee Sainvil. Most of everybody here in PAD knows me as Dee. I am going on my 9th year of being in the public sector, my 5th year officially lobbying as a registered lobbyist, and I'll go into that later. Graduated from Cooley in Lansing, Michigan. I'm a native Floridian. I currently work for the city of Fort Lauderdale in sunny Florida. I am their government and external affairs manager. It's 3 weeks on the job, so it's a new transition. I used to work for Broward County, which is the second largest county in South Florida, after Miami and right before Palm Beach. And basically what I did was I went to Tallahassee, I went to DC, I talked to the lawmakers, made policy changes, and brought home, in a span of 4 years, over $40 million for the county and for the people of Broward County. So that's it in a nutshell. Did I get it all?
I think that's good. Okay, and Steve, how about you? Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you kind of came to get into lobbying?
Sure. I work with a nonprofit, and we serve small governments, and these are very small governments. You can think of small cities. Well, these are even smaller most of the time. These are, as you look on a map, the places between the cities, and for us, they're called townships. We serve about 1,800 townships in the state of Minnesota, and we are a variety of things we do. Education, we provide legal information and help them with that. To lower their costs, but we also do some lobbying for them. Pretty much every year there's something that they either want or that they need help stopping. So every year we have something to do. Some years it's the same topics over and over again, but that's an important piece of what our local governments deal with. I got into it. I started as a staff attorney, and in the interview, the executive director noticed some political work in my background, and they had a full-time lobbyist, an attorney, and he asked, "Are you interested in doing this? Do you have any experience with this?" And at the time, I didn't have lobbying experience. It was different political experience. But he said, "Well, we'd like to give you some of this if you're open to it." And the first year, I took 2 policy issues. One was something that was more offensive that we were going to get money for, and one was more monitoring or defensive election issues. So I spent maybe 10% of my time in that year lobbying for that and monitoring. And it's not a lot because my time was split in that year, but it went well. And each year after that, I ended up doing more. To the point where at different times I'm kind of running our lobbying effort, or between us and me and the executive director. So it's now a big part of my work in session, when they're in session, less so when they're out of session.
Great. So I just want to say that I have some prepared questions, but I'm guessing people in the attending are going to have questions too. So if you have questions, please put them in the chat, and we'll get to them in a few moments. So again, just put your questions in the chat, and that would be great. So the next thing, what is a typical day like for you? I know, Daphnee, you just started a new job. Steve, you've been at yours for a while, but Daphnee, you've been in lobbying for a while. Kind of what's your average, your typical day? Is there such thing as a typical day?
No, well, it depends. So my typical day right now still hasn't ended. We have a city commission meeting going on, so I've got that somewhere in the background. But there's post session and there's pre-session. And in Florida, legislative session is 60 days. And in odd numbered years, it starts in March, and even numbered years, it starts in January. Before it starts, official session starts, you have about 5 to 7 weeks of what they call interim committee weeks. And that's usually when all the bills are filed. You get to actually go and talk to the House members or the senators or to the governor or to whatever agencies that you think you're going to, need during session. And the day generally starts at 5 in the morning and probably ends for me around 2 or 3 on a good day. On a bad day, it's a nonstop 24-hour day. And you just go and go and go. And it's either because you're meeting during regular hours, which is in the Capitol, and then you have to meet after hours outside of the Capitol. And it can consist of receptions, it can consist of dinners, it can consist of just cigars, wine, scotch, whiskey, or water. Like, there's so many different places that you could meet a legislator. So I would say last session, the best day that I had, I started at 7 in the morning, bombardment of emails from my contract lobbyists, and had to meet a senator at the nail salon. And she couldn't pay for me because we have a gift ban here in Florida. So anything above $5, you've got to cover on your own, regardless of if you're friends, if it's just a senator, if it's another lobbyist, you still have to pay your due. So you have to make sure your checks are separate. So typical day is a good, I would say 10, 12, 16-hour day. I don't know, Steve, what do you think?
I'm struck by state to state. This is different because, For example, Daphnee mentioned that they have that interim period where they can plan and bills get introduced. We don't really have that. You have elections, and then you have, we start our legislative session in January, at least in the first year of the biennium. And if you want a bill at that time, you got to try and get somebody to get it ready, but they probably won't put it in until session starts. And so it's a long lead up of, there's no committee meetings yet. You can try to take individual meetings, but you don't even know if the caucuses, the parties have their leadership yet. And so you're not sure who to talk to. So it's going to vary state to state with procedure. I think that is striking to me based on what Daphnee said. As far as a typical day, to me, the time that's put in is a big piece of it. Especially if you're in session. If you're in session, it's a lot different than when you're out of session. For us in session, you have to react a lot, and that's where the time comes in. You have a lot to organize in that time. For me, when I look at it, I don't look at it necessarily as a day. For me, it starts on Sunday nights because in Minnesota, our legislature, they meet from Monday to Thursday. And then Friday, they go home to their districts. Sunday night, they put out the committee schedule for the upcoming week. And that's when you know what's going to be heard in each committee. They'll list the bills out. You'll get a sense of what's going on. Now, if it's your bill, your author probably has told you what's coming. Okay, and you may know that. But that's where you're playing offense, and you know that, and you have a lot more time to plan for it usually. But when it's something you're surprised about and you're playing defense, that's where you're looking at it. For me, Sunday night, calling our team and figuring out what's going on. Do we need to talk to a legislator right away in the morning or their staff? A lot of times you just get their staff, and that is okay. That's normal. Do you need to get some of your members to make some phone calls for you? Basically, how are you going to respond to whatever's going on that week? And then you get into Monday. and you start hitting your committee meetings. You start trying to fit in meetings with legislators between then. You try to have member contact. So the people who you kind of answer to, for us, it's the township officers. They understand what's going on, especially if you're using them to try and put pressure on legislators, to call their legislators and talk about some issue. I typically I don't have to get up at 5, thank God, because that would not work for me very well. I'm not a morning person. I'm much better working a little later and through the evening. So, but yes, you do have to be prepared for long hours, especially in session. And as you get towards either the end of session, when the hours are really long, they can go all night, basically, for these sometimes are closed door meetings and you don't know what's going on until they release something in between, or committee deadlines. We have 3 committee deadlines here where, for example, your bill has to get past at least the first committee in either chamber for it to survive. Okay. And that's not strictly speaking true, because it can always come back to life at the end of the session, but you plan for that. So, and that kind of repeats Monday through Thursday, and then you take your break, and then we're back at it the next Sunday.
Great. What kind of skills and training do you feel is necessary or beneficial to do lobbying, or to pursue this kind of career?
I'll let Steve go first with that.
Kindergarten skills. Wait your turn. Make friends. If you bring something, bring one for everyone. These are your leave behinds, what you're going to leave for somebody. Make it short. Okay. Don't hit, don't bite, literally, figuratively. Okay. Those are critical because it's a people business. You have to be able to have patience with people, sit there and listen. And Daphnee was describing this a little earlier, just before we all jumped in here, about how you really have to have a poker face sometimes, because you're going to hear things that you don't like, are not good for your members. Maybe you're personally upset by, but you don't get anywhere by reacting negatively. You have to be patient, take your time, listen to people. I think that's critical. You need good communication. If you're not the best communicator, recognize it, improve it, or find people on your team who are better, or you usually have some kind of organization behind you. Find the people in your organization who can speak on its behalf, who are better than you. That's okay, because all you care about at the end is the result. It doesn't matter if it was your face there or somebody else's. And Daphnee, I'll let you go.
Yeah, everything that you said, teamwork for me makes the dream work. That's like rule number 1. You have to have some analytical skills, because you're reading a lot of legislation that could touch on different areas. If, for example, I work for local government, so my local government, I could be reading a bill about healthcare, and then when I'm done with that, I put it down, I'm reading a bill about transportation, or I'm reading something about criminal justice reform. So you have to have that ability to take a small break and analyze what you're reading as you're reading it. And then strategy, to me, is a big thing to try and acquire skills and strategic thinking. Sometimes it's better to just let something go and then come back to it later. Make somebody think that you forgot about whatever they said or did. Have thick skin. That goes with the strategy. Don't take everything that's said or done personally, because what's done in the Capitol building, what's done in a committee room is done because it's all business. It's about a bill. It's not because of a personal attack, unless they mention you by name and say, you have offended me. Otherwise, just take it all in stride. Put a smile on your face. Don't look super aggressive. Especially as a woman in the industry, there's a fine line between, looking pleasant and friendly and looking firm and knowing what you're talking about and saying, I mean business right now. We're not, this isn't Saturday morning at a football game. Let's finish talking about this piece of legislation. Will you or won't you? Are you a yes? Are you a no? No wishy-washy language. Patience, of course, is a virtue. I lack some patience sometimes, but over the years, you start to hone and craft that skill. Listen to understand. Don't just listen and it goes in one ear and out the other. Sometimes the member is trying to tell you something through subliminal messaging that you need to pick up on. And by listening to the context in which he or she is talking, you'll figure out that A, this isn't the best time to talk about it. B, what you're worried about, you shouldn't be worried about because this is just a bill that they're filing because they want to teach somebody a lesson and they don't intend for it to go anywhere. They're going to tank it at some point in the future. And if you miss those hidden clues, you could potentially self-sabotage yourself because you're going to annoy them. You're going to piss them off by showing up in their office multiple times when they wanted you to just leave it alone. Don't talk to anybody else about it. And then my last piece of advice is to know your audience when you're writing and when you're speaking, because we have 120 in Florida, 120 members in the House. We have 40 members in the Senate. No, each person is the same, and neither is their staff. So you're going to have to write to your audience, research your audience, like do your homework. It takes a little bit of extra time to Google that person, but if you can find some common ground or some connector, it will definitely help get your foot in the door when trying to pass or, kill something that you're looking at.
Daphnee mentioned be able to reason well. Also remember that it's politics and sometimes reason has no place in politics. So you're going to have to accept that you have good reasons and they're not going to accept them anyway.
Yeah. And also in reasoning, sometimes if you can think of the most complex, convoluted rationale there is to explain something, that is how they will understand it. Common sense sometimes is like across the street and then some.
I don't believe in common sense.
What is common sense?
I like that concept. And then my last prepared question is, what are some actions that people can take to lobby or be an advocate for issues or organizations that they believe in, even if they're not professional lobbyists? What can they do to get access to legislators and decision makers from a volunteer perspective?
I started last time, Daphnee. You can, if you'd like. I want to share.
Here we go. I was on mute. Oops. Yeah. That's a tough one. I would say just to volunteer. Just volunteer on a campaign during campaign season. Phone bank if you can't walk. I know I've got some other stuff in my brain.
There's usually a group for everything. So I'd start by trying to find out if there's a group for you, because then you don't have to do the footwork to start the thing. You're going to use somebody else's expertise to do it. If not, you can start out as simply by calling your legislators, and you call yours. If they're not yours, they tend to not care about what you have to say, unless it's an issue they really like or care about. Okay. And in that case, they're probably already doing something about it. So you could start by talking to a legislator. Maybe they file a bill. And if you've ever looked at how many bills are filed compared to how many pass, it's infinitesimal. It's nothing. So getting a bill doesn't mean a lot. You want something else, something more. You could always try talking to a lobbyist, and there's books of lobbyists out there. For our state, we have a Minnesota Government Relations Council, which is any lobbyist for any public, private, anything can join this thing. We've got a book. Okay, open it up, make a phone call and ask if you can shadow them. They'll be so flattered that you're interested, and they will walk you around and they will tell you anything you want to know. Okay. That would be a good way, I think, to show you have interest and to start learning something about the legislature that you're working with. It costs your time because they're probably going to be willing to work, to show you something. I would start that way.
I would also say to, especially like obtaining your JD, look at law firms that have government affairs arms to them and reach out to those individuals who are, the firm partners on the lobbyist, on the government affairs side of things. And they absolutely love it when you ask them to be their mentors. It's just like stroking someone's ego, but more so it's because it's so hard to find other people who are just as enamored or passionate about lobbying as they are or as we are. Like my brother says, you have to be a certain type of crazy to get into it because you deal with so much and you have to deal with it all in such a short period of time. So someone asked, is flattery a big part of the field? Yes. Flattery and plagiarism are huge parts of the field. Plagiarism is the biggest form of flattery anybody could get. If you're quoted on the floor of any chamber, it's amazing. You might as well just jump up and down, throw confetti. But flattery will take you only so far. You have to be knowledgeable. You have to know the issue or topic that you are going to that particular member for. And if you don't know the answer, just say you don't know the answer. Do not try to lie. Do not try to make it up because they will call you out. It's like a shark smelling blood in the water. It's like they have a sixth or seventh sense that says, oh, this person really doesn't know what they're talking about. I can nail them on a technical question and see if they're really telling the truth or not. Because all you have in the lobbying game is your reputation to be honest, believe it or not, and your reputation for knowing your shit, pardon my French, and you don't want to go down as that person that talks a whole bunch, but has nothing to back it up with. You lose credibility. You need your credibility to succeed. But you have to be humble with it. Just because, you land $40 million in one session in Florida doesn't mean you can go all around town bragging about it as much as you want to, because it's unheard of in a year where your state got slammed with 2 hurricanes, the state's not giving out money, the governor's cracked down on everything, and then you come out with a whole bunch of money. You really don't want to go bragging to a whole bunch of people that you managed to do that. That's how you get reporters at your front door, or you're on the front page, and you want to avoid that too. So I know I kind of went off a little on a tangent, but volunteering or trying to intern at a law firm with a local member of your council, your town or city or county, that's how I did it. I got into it because I wrote a letter to my county commissioner, who was my district commissioner, asked her if she had an internship. She didn't, and she gave it to the director of government affairs. And I started just working for free beyond the 10 hours that they wanted me to work. Like, I was like, no, I'm available to do this. I'm available to go to Tallahassee. And when you show your passion and your interest like that, they give you more and more responsibility, where they don't go out to look for somebody who's qualified per se, because you have the drive and the issue of where you're at, like, what they're looking for. So they give you the opportunity before anybody else. That's what I'll say about that.
Another thing you can do, if it's your issue and you're not employed to do this, if you're pushing for something, sometimes you just need a different messenger. And I mentioned that before, like, if you're not the best communicator, well, maybe you're a great communicator, but you just need somebody else to get the message out. And I'll give you an example. I was sitting in, it was a task force meeting. So it was an executive branch task force, and it was something we'd all been working on for years. And everybody in the room was, kind of, they understand we're all going in this direction, and that was understood. But somebody came in to do testimony, and it was like a 9-year-old girl testifying about why it was important to get money to put broadband into buses in rural areas. The attention that little girl got was astonishing. Okay. People loved to hear her talk to this table full of adults. That was a win for that group. That was the absolute best way they could carry their message. Okay. And the little girl didn't know a lot about it other than, hey, I'd like this on the bus. But that was a really effective way to do that. I've also seen it effective. You get students in with you to talk about an issue to a legislator. The tone of the conversation changes. They give you more time. If you're after them, your meeting just got pushed back because they're happy to give that time to a kid. So use that to your advantage if it's that kind of message.
I have a ton of questions in the chat. If you have more, please add them to the chat. So the first one is, are there different types of lobbyists, and how do you know this is what you wanted to do?
Oh, I'll take that one. Yeah, there are different types of lobbyists, but I'm gonna need you to be a little bit more specific in what you meant by different types of lobbyists. Because are you talking about ego, or are you talking about private sector, public sector?
It was Katie McKenzie. If you can unmute yourself and go ahead and clarify, or that'd be great.
I was talking about private versus public.
Okay, yeah. So that's the one thing, is we never assume what you mean, even if we think that's what you mean, because you lose if you assume. But okay, so private sector, public sector. So I would be considered a public sector lobbyist because my client is my city. I don't have to retain private clients or businesses or people. Every department out of the 9 departments in that city is considered my client. That's who I register to lobby for. Private sector means, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I haven't been in the private sector, but you work for a company, a firm, if not your own, for other people and or businesses and or special interest groups, whoever they may be. So like your nonprofits, your Apples, your Googles, your Amazons, your small mom and pops, if they can afford you. Who else? You could lobby for yourself if you wanted and had an issue that you needed to get out there. NRA, so many different types of activists out there that actually retain lobbyists. You wouldn't believe it. And the one thing before I get into everything, in Florida, don't know how it is for you, but you have to register to lobby, both the legislature and the executive branch, which is the office of the governor and all the state agencies that fall under the executive. So you have to register your issue, or not your issues per se, but you do have to register to lobby both of those branches. Oh, and how I got into it. I realized that I did not want to practice law after taking trial advocacy in law school. That was a big no-no. I was a mooter, and this fell in line with being a mooter in some ways, because all I have to do is know the law or know what I need to know and just argue that in front of a panel of people, such as a committee. And that's how I realized that did not want to practice, wanted to go into policy. I'm a political nerd, so it was just something that I was already passionate about.
I got into it because I say yes to everything the employer wants me to do. And you become a utility player, and that's how I started. Like I said, it was like offhand. Oh, well, would you happen to do this? Yes, and it worked out well. They liked what I did, and so it grew to be more of what I do. It wasn't what I went looking for in particular. It wasn't that I was opposed to it. It was just an opportunity, and somebody offered it, and why not try it? and that's the approach I took. As far as if you want to get paid to do this, you can find like the direct client, like Daphnee and I both work for the client that we lobby for. Okay. You can go out on your own, just like you could form your law firm. You can form a government relations practice that you're just a lobbyist. And we've used those contract lobbyists. There's ups and downs to that. Same as if you're going to start your own law practice. Okay. But you probably want to work with somebody first, and you may be able to do that, get hired on at a private firm doing that, or for a client like we do in-house. Law firms are harder to get into because they typically have larger clients. I think a more stable client base, and so it's less easy to just jump in and start there. But those are all different ways you could get paid to do this.
Are there, and then another question is, are there internships or internship programs that you did or that you would recommend to see if lobbying is for you?
I did not do an internship. I was a poli-sci guy in school. It's law school because you can't do anything with poli-sci. So I was just interested in the topic, and through law school, I was interested in communicating with people. Like Daphnee, I did well at the presentation aspect. This bordered some of that, but I didn't have a particular training or internship for this, other than my coworkers, watching what was going on, and learning on the job.
Yeah, aside from my small 1-year stint, my last year of law school, working for a state representative, which wasn't even lobbying, it was just working for the legislator. The internship that I had when I moved back to Florida was it. And, you don't even have to have an internship to get into lobbying. For me, you're a lobbyist every day that you wake up and you have to go in for a job interview because you're selling yourself, just like how you have to sell an issue, negotiating a car, when you're buying a house, you don't realize that you are advocating your side of things. Or when you're talking to your friends and you're having a friendly debate, like that's being a lobbyist, not necessarily in its literal meaning, but being an advocate in some way, shape, or form. You're doing it without doing it. When you get into the nuances of everything, that's what makes it different when you're official. But my advice is just what Steve said. Look at the different organizations. There's an organization literally for everybody. Literally. Google it. Everybody has an association, organization, company that you could find an interest in and just say, hey, wanted to know if I could volunteer, or do you need extra set of hands? And they'll be more than happy to have you on.
Let's see. I think part of this question we already addressed a little earlier, but I'll ask it and then see if you want to elaborate or. So it's a two-parter. What skills, experience would you say is necessary or important to becoming a lobbyist? And then how did your experience as an attorney help you become a lobbyist?
I'm not licensed to practice, so I'm not an attorney. And then we touched on some of the skills, but like for me, teamwork, being analytical, being strategic, having some thick skin. Also, what I didn't mention before, having a sense of humor is also good, because you can break the ice by cracking a joke, depending, again, knowing your audience, depending on who your audience is, and then listening to understand. It's literally about building relationships. So for me, I could say I am friends with a majority of the members that I have gotten to know in the past 9 years. Like I could see them, I could see them post session, I could see them during session, we could see each other out of state. And most of them aren't even in my, what I call my legislative delegation, which is my locality, the Fort Lauderdale, Broward County area. Like they represent North Florida, or they represent the Keys, or even some in different states like Georgia or North Carolina, California. You go to so many conferences where you see them that you actually build genuine relationships, and they appreciate that. They appreciate you wanting to get to know them outside of their vote. So for the ones that you actually like, we don't agree on everything, and I'm pretty sure, Steve, you could agree that we could have philosophical differences 100%, but you're still a cool person to go to dinner with and hang out with and get to know. So, build those relationships, network. That to me is key in the lobbying industry.
I'll add two things. One is organization, because you're campaigning. We talk about campaigning as like you're running for office. Well, you're running for an idea. It's the same thing. And when you're off session, you're trying to build a group, whether it's a coalition, whether it's build consensus with the legislators you need to move something forward. But that takes organization. And it's usually not the lobbyist alone doing it. It's members. You're trying to get them together. You're trying to get them on message. And it's hard to get them to stay on message. You have to, in session, as we mentioned before, there's so much going on. You really have to organize your time. So if you're not a calendarer like me by nature, you got to learn how to use that thing really to your advantage so you don't miss meetings and all that. That's a pretty basic thing you're going to need to do if you're not a scheduled person, because this is a scheduled lifestyle and profession that you have to do. The other one is once you're there, political party doesn't matter so much. It does because it's politics still, but most of the things that they do, they're not disagreeing over party differences. There's a few things they'll pick to fight about, and they almost pick them purposely to fight about. Okay, but most of the time, you're all just there trying to get everything done. So, I don't always even know the party if I just meet somebody for the first time. You don't know that, and they don't say it. And you don't know where they are until you go look them up and see where they are. So you have to be able to work with both sides. That's not a possibility not to, at least in the state level. I've heard in the federal level, you can be more party-oriented lobbying. So the experience that helps you as an attorney, first of all, as an attorney, whether you know it or not, you get instant credibility in anything. When you're an attorney. So that piece already gives you this thing that a lot of legislators now don't have. There used to be a lot of legislators were attorneys. That's not as true now, okay? But when you talk about what the law means, they tend to not be as combative, or they'll direct the conversation a different way because you're a lawyer and they're not. And they may have counsel. They'll have committee counsel there in that. But that's just one thing that helps you right away. You're an attorney, that's going to help you. Other than that, I don't know that I'd say there's one skill that helps you. It's not like you're sitting in Civ Pro or something and this skill helps you or something like that. Effective communication and just how to work with people. That's really what the business is about.
Were there things that you did in law school as far as classes or training or activities, both in law? I'm going to throw in undergrad too, that really prepared you to be a lobbyist, or something that you would recommend, or coursework that you took, or an activity you were in that really kind of gave you at least a good skill set or base to lead you into this career field?
For me, no, I didn't do any coursework in this in law school. In undergrad, I was political science, and I did paid campaigning work. So that was my non-lobbying political work. I was paid to go out and talk to people and try to sway their vote on issues. It wasn't candidates, it was issues. But that was my closest relation to what I do now. And it was a little different because you're dealing with just whoever happens to live in that house that you're wandering up to. So it's a little bit different than what you do as a lobbyist, because again, it's not just talking about that issue. There's a lot of organization behind it. Daphnee, any?
Yeah, no, I think as an undergrad, I would say take some debate classes. I was a legal studies psychology major, so I double majored. Psychology helps, but psychology is also not for everybody. But I would say, a speech and debate class would definitely help you as an undergrad. But I didn't really specialize in anything beyond that. It was just fell into the lap timing.
And then another question is, what's the general career trajectory as a lobbyist?
There's so many. You want to go with that first, or you want me?
It's your turn, but I'll go if you want.
So in Florida, the career trajectory has been lobbyist, elected official, lobbyist, elected official, and it can go in different ways. So a personal friend of mine was a county commissioner, and he became a state representative, then a state senator, got termed out of both, and then was recruited by a private sector firm to represent them at triple what I made, doing less than what I did. So he became a lobbyist for about, I want to say, 3 years. And after that, decided to make a federal run because he missed politics so much and didn't want to be beholden to the rules of a lobbyist anymore, as if being an elected official was any easier. So that has generally been the trajectory that I have seen people go in. They definitely run for a higher office after or before becoming a lobbyist.
Our lobbyists generally do not become elected officials, so that was surprising to learn that. Ours are, if you're going to make a career of it, a lot of times you will start, if you're in the public sector, those folks tend to spend some time doing it, and then they get lured away by higher salary to private sector, larger employers. One that I worked with recently, she's very good at what she did. She worked for the cities group, similar to us, but with the cities. She did that for maybe 5-6 years. And then I want to say it was like a contracting group, one of the big infrastructure builders. Okay. Big money that goes into this stuff, right? Well, she got pulled to do that. And I'm sure she's making much more doing that. And you typically work your way up that way into, typically that's a larger office. You're going to have more than one lobbyist. And like anything, you'll work your way up in that office if you wanted to, into more managerial positions where you're less standing in the committee room while everybody else's bill is heard, and more organization and management of a bunch of different lobbyists. Others decide they love this and they want to be in that committee room, even if their bill isn't up for the day, and they'll sit there for 4 hours anyway. It's a weird thing. I don't get that piece of it. There's no thrill to me to sit in that room and listen to things that are not my issue, but some people love it. Guy I used to work with would wander into rooms that we didn't even need to be into. I don't know why. It was like, one of them was he wandered into a hearing on trash collection. Now, our folks don't do this. So it's a municipal issue, but it's not our issue. At one point, the committee chair, who knew him, stopped and said, "Kent, why are you here?" And this is an open public meeting. Anyone can come into it. But the legislator made a point to call somebody out and said, "What the hell are you doing here?" So there are people who love it that much. And if that's you, then you can stay a lobbyist like this. And typically you're going to end up, if you're private, you're going to build your practice. You can be very successful by yourself, but you can get people to work with you and get more clients that way, the same as you would if you're in a law firm. If you are in public and like our sector, you may have that same opportunity to grow, but public sector, there's often caps in what they can pay you. So if that is of importance to you, pay attention to that.
And then someone asked, what if you could clarify what you mean by defensive and offensive means?
I think that was me. Is that right, Daphnee? Okay. An offensive is where you have a bill, you have an objective, and you're trying to get it passed. And the advantage is you can plan. You know it's coming. You have the idea. Your membership wants this. You're lining up legislators and people to bring the grassroots message. And you start the campaign. You start the offensive. And then anybody who doesn't like it, they have to play defense against what you just did. Okay. I am not a personal injury guy, but those of you who may do or have heard about this, I'm told this is the advantage of being the plaintiff's attorney in personal injury. You manage the clock. You decide when things go, and everybody else has to react. Okay. I get that on the insurance trust side. I manage an insurance trust, and we're defending, and you got to react. Okay. That's what it is on defense. And the same as in the legislature. So when I see that bill on Sunday night that, yeah, I knew the bill was introduced. We hoped it wouldn't go anywhere, but now it's on a committee hearing schedule. Now I have to deal with it. And now I have to start figuring out what's going on because somebody's serious about it. That's what I mean by defense. And you have to react. You have less time when you're on defense. Sometimes you're trying to kill it outright. Sometimes you are going to let it get through with the understanding that the next committee is going to kill it, or you're going to have somebody in conference kill it for you or modify it. Or, I mean, there's all kinds of strategies you can use with these things, but sometimes it's just run out the clock. Okay. That's the other thing. You got to work with everybody, but they're certainly not all trying to help each other. They may be trying to stall out and ruin your bill. They weren't negotiating in good faith, right? That's fair game. So sometimes it's hard to have patience with people and to remain professional when it feels like what they're doing doesn't feel like professional work. Okay. But again, their client cares about the result. They don't really care about how they got there as long as it wasn't illegal. So that's offense versus defense. Much better to be on offense.
The question is do you have to be sponsored to be a quote principal?
What's a principal? Do you mean the entity being lobbied for, or do you mean?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's it. So who asked that question?
This was David.
David asked that question.
It depends on your state, I believe, because every state has their own rules. So in Florida, you have a principal who has to verify that you are who you are. So today, I had to register to lobby for the city of Fort Lauderdale. The principal is my boss, the city manager. An email goes to him saying, hey, Daphnee is registered to lobby, saying she's lobbying on behalf of the city. Is this true or not? Yes. And he says yes. And therefore you're authorized temporarily to lobby because your principal has vouched for you. Do you necessarily need a principal? No, because I think either you have an entity that you're lobbying for associated with a firm, or like me, I'm not associated with the firm. I'm a public sector city employee. So that's why I have a principal, because my manager is my principal. With the lobbying firm, I do not believe that button is like a requirement for y'all.
We don't have that structure that I know of. Our company reports, we have to report lobbying for a variety of reasons, both corporate, as it's a nonprofit, and because as each lobbyist, you have to report what you're doing. You just have to say generically, these are the things you lobby on. And so I don't know of any sponsorship. It's just that they do the report. I wouldn't need somebody to approve me to be able to lobby. I could go and do that wandering around the hall. At a certain monetary threshold, you have to register. I think it's if you earn $3,000 or more in a year, or if you spend more than $250 in our state, then you have to register, and that's state by state, and you'll have to check the requirements for that. So
Yeah, you can self-lobby.
mm-hmm.
This question's for Dee. Could you talk more about being a woman lobbyist in the Florida political sphere? Any advice for a fellow woman starting out?
We'd be here till like next year and a month if I went into it. It's hard. I won't even put up a front. Like, it's very difficult to be what is considered in Florida double minority. So I'm Black and I'm a woman and I'm young, even though I don't look that young because I'm super stressed. But
You look very young, don't worry.
It's hard to be, in all seriousness though, it's very difficult because we have to work just as hard as our male counterparts in the industry. It takes a long time to garnish respect with some members, even with some of your colleagues. You don't get that off the bat. Okay, yeah, you're good, you know what you're talking about because you're a dude. No offense, Steve, or to any of the males here.
Many things I don't know what I'm talking about.
Right.
Then I won't talk.
But as a woman, not only do you have to know your stuff, but you have to make sure the way that you're dressed is appropriate, because what you think is appropriate is not appropriate for some conservative males. Again, this is why I say, it all ties back to knowing your audience. Like in our state legislature, there are some very conservative Caucasian older gentlemen who have been members before term limits were instituted, and they still believe that women should not wear pants and should wear pantyhose and stockings and the whole 9 yards, and beyond below the knee type skirts. I'm 5'4". If I wear any skirt that falls below the knee, I look like a stumpy log. Like, I want to lobby, I want to get what I want, but I want to look good while I'm doing it. Can't blame me. So as a woman, you have to be sure that the shirt isn't too low cut. It's not too revealing. Something's not too satiny. But you also need to know your substantive stuff. Like, if you're going in to Representative Fenske and he's a data guy and your data is outdated, don't go to the meeting. Do not go in 2020 with 2002 statistics. Just don't do it to yourself. Like, you'll never get to where you need to be with him in 60 days time. Because in Florida, you have 60 days. That's it. And it goes by every day, fast. If you schedule a meeting with somebody and you're feeling sick and you're not going to make it, it's okay to call their staff. Tell them, hey, got a bug, not going to be able to make it. I sincerely apologize. Is it possible we can reschedule, for another time when I'm feeling well? And especially after this whole Me Too situation, it's become even harder for female lobbyists to get into the door because a lot of the male legislators don't want to see us. At least they don't want to see us without a male counterpart. Or, they want to see you with the door open and 5 of their staffers in there. So, there's a lot of hurdles that I've had to cross. And Steve mentioned it too. There's a bipartisanship that you also have to master and maneuver. I don't see party lines because our job pretty much is supposed to be bipartisan. Doesn't matter if you're a Republican or a Democrat. Like, I'm going to need something from both of you. My job is to make sure that my client is satisfied. So again, as a woman, know your stuff, like, have respect for yourself. Don't degrade yourself to get your stuff passed. There's always next year. Your client may not like it. If you're in the private sector, you have to be ultra careful about that because you could lose a client, but do not lose your self-respect for any piece of legislation. as a woman, respect yourself. Because if you respect yourself, you have your integrity, you'll make it. You'll make it, and you'll be even more successful than men who have been doing it for longer than you. So that's my spiel. Sorry.
I'm going to say you still look very young, so all right.
No need to apologize.
There's so many questions. I'm trying to get to all of them and still be respectful of everyone's time. So I'm kind of looking through them. So here's one. Do either of you have political aspirations yourself?
It's a very personal question. Sometimes. Most often it's when you meet with people over and over and you feel like you could do a better job, which might be true. Maybe it's just you're frustrated, but some of those times you feel like I could do a better job, and you'll get all kinds in the legislature. You'll get some that you feel are brilliant or that really understand what's going on or are just great people, again, regardless of party, and you'll get some that you don't know how they arrived at the building in the morning. And so, but somebody sent them there. That's somebody's representative. So you got to work with them. And for my state, that doesn't typically impact what you do unless you go lobby for certain groups. If the group you pick to lobby for is very political or is identified with a particular party, yeah, you better run in a district where that's popular. Okay. Or minimize what you did. Okay. We might have criminal defense types here. I don't believe they're all criminals, right? They're defending people. That doesn't mean they're a criminal. So that also comes into play. You're just representing somebody's interest, and you better be willing to do that as a lobbyist. You better be willing to carry a message you hate. And sometimes I carry messages I hate, but that's my job.
Yeah, we all carry messages we don't like. No, I have. Maybe before I actually, maybe in the initial naive stages of lobbying where I thought I could make a huge difference in the world, I was considering a higher office, but now, no, you couldn't pay me. No, absolutely not. You can't even moor your boat in, at a pier without someone taking a picture saying, oh, look, their tags are expired and they want me to pay, blah. No. I'll leave that for any one of you on here to run. I will be your lobbyist or, campaign manager, whatever you need, strategist. I'll be behind the scenes. Put me out there in the front, I'll be the first one on CNN or Fox News with some crazy caption.
If you do get elected, you're probably going to have a great chance at getting a lobbying job afterward, though. So, yes. You're muted, Michelle.
Just over here talking to myself. It happens. So we're a little bit after 6 o'clock. I know there's other questions. I really appreciate that. Both Daphnee and Steve, if I sent these questions to you, could you maybe do up some quick answers, and we can post them to the page on the website, and so everybody can still see them, and we can add them to the YouTube video or the video when it's posted. Would you both agree to do something like that?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
That would be awesome. Again, I want to thank everyone for joining us. We really appreciate it. If you have ideas for other topics, if you have something you want to speak on, feel free to reach out to me or Andrew Sagan at the executive office, and just let us know. Also, thank you to Daphnee and Steve. You guys were great. This is wonderful information. Thank you for taking the time and sharing your experiences with us. We really appreciate it.